Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions about Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave, and this week it's our January 2026 special subject, The Archers in Technicolor. 3 films made by the great Powell and Pressburger team, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, Black Narcissus, and The Red Shoes. After that, stay tuned for Fear and Moviegoing in Toronto, where we continue our Naruse Odyssey at the TIFF Lightbox. We saw Flowing and The Stranger in a Woman.
So Dave, this is one of your special subjects. Did you want to tell us about your relationship to these particular films, to these filmmakers?
Deep and abiding love for Powell and Pressburger goes back to the late 1980s when I saw Life and Death of Colonel Blimp on PBS. Little did I know at that time it had been through quite a harrowing physical journey. For many, many years, it was only available in a 90-minute version or even less, possibly, often shown in black and white, which is staggering because so much of what we love about the film, now that it's been restored, is the Technicolor. And of course, that's the keynote of all 3 of these films. We've got an Archers in Black and White episode coming up a little later this year. But I was struck by the audacity of the film and the incredible performances, the mood that it creates, and the nostalgia that is so palpable in it. And when I was a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, I was possibly even more nostalgic than I am now, which is incredible. No movie made before or since has done it better. In terms of showing how people and events from your youth can haunt you throughout your life and continue to ramify in strange ways through all of your subsequent experiences. Also, I was a history buff, very interested in the way that Powell and Pressburger chose to present these cataclysmic events. They're touching major historical points, but always glancing blows, a slanted angle.
Fair to say?
After I found Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, of course I was zeroed in on the weekly TV listings in a hawk-like manner, hoping to see other films by these guys, and eventually I did get Black Narcissus and The Red Shoes taped off TV as well. I watched all of these movies many, many, many times in my teens and 20s, and I've continued to see them whenever the opportunity presents itself. We did discuss all of these movies a couple of years ago in Fear and Moviegoing in Toronto, because the TIFF Lightbox did a retrospective on them. We'll get into a little bit more depth this week. How about your experiences?
We're about the same age, so in the early 90s, when I was really starting to watch a lot of classic cinema, early to mid-90s, Powell and Pressburger were on everyone's radar. I remember watching Black Narcissus because I was really into 50s, 60s Hitchcock at the time. It's an obvious influence. I remember watching The Red Shoes, but being really, really disturbed by it because for a female viewer in particular, it's a real horror movie. I'm sure I watched A Matter of Life and Death. Oh, and I watched The Tales of Hoffmann often because I was really interested in opera at the time. And I also read The Tales of Hoffmann. I don't think I watched The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, though. I think I watched that for the first time with you, and this might be my 3rd or 4th viewing of it, only because of you. I am not by nature a Powell and Pressburger superfan, but through your appreciation, I have now, well, partly through that, mostly through that, I've now watched these films and others of theirs many times, and I am growing in appreciation of them. But who are Powell and Pressburger, and why does it matter?
Right, so they're a team, and they're always billed together as the creators and producers of these films, made by their company, The Archers. Michael Powell was the one who handled the aspects of the filmmaking that we would typically associate with a director. Emeric Pressburger was primarily the writer, but they collaborated in a semi-mystical way that they felt could only be rendered with this joint credit. Powell was English, Pressburger was Hungarian. He came to the British film industry as a refugee from the horrors of Nazism.
Right, which will be relevant.
Absolutely.
Certainly to The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. The Senses of Cinema article on Powell and Pressburger I thought was interesting in the particular way that they presented the apparently widespread perspective that their films are anomalous within the tradition of British cinema, and for that reason weren't easily assimilated into critical reception of that cinema. The article by Adrienne Danks talks about British cinema as being primarily defined by realism, and how in Powell and Pressburger's cinema there's more of a dichotomy, presentation of two worlds that may be interdependent, realism and magic or expressionism.
Sure, and the balance changes from film to film.
The article uses Black Narcissus as maybe the most dramatic example of this.
Now, interestingly, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is a very restrained film, pretty different from our other two movies.
But it certainly has an idealistic and romantic and anti-realistic strain to it.
Of course it does. All of their films have both intermingled. That's, I think, the main thing I want to emphasize. That you've got all of these quiet, realistic, funny scenes in their movies, and you will often get explosions of melodrama.
Yeah, and I think it'll be really useful, actually, to think about Black Narcissus in those terms. An important fact to know about Powell and Pressburger is that Michael Powell's filmmaking career after he and Pressburger parted ways was almost immediately destroyed by middle-brow critics who were not happy about the subject matter of Peeping Tom.
It's definitely an acquired taste, and nobody took the trouble to acquire it at that time.
But they didn't just dislike it, they were horrified.
Yeah, it was treated like pornography. He managed to live on into the 1980s and befriend Martin Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker, married Thelma Schoonmaker.
To spouse her.
That's right. He had the satisfaction of knowing that Scorsese was on the scene and was going to save his great masterpieces and refurbish them for the late 20th and 21st century.
So many of these stories of long-lived filmmakers and performers who fall out of fashion. In Michael Powell's case, he fell out of fashion in an unusual way.
Very dramatic way.
Yeah, but you know, the Frank Capra story of your films being rediscovered by university students in the 60s and 70s and so forth.
We'll visit with our friend Leonard Maltin briefly. His TV Movies and Video Guide, 1991 edition. Maltin gives Life and Death of Colonel Blimp 4 stars out of a possible 4. Superb, sentimental story of a staunch British soldier and the incidents that dovetail in his long, eventful life. Opens in World War II and flashes back as far as the Boer War. Carr is charming as 3 different women in the Colonel's life. The title character bears no relation to the famous David Lowe caricature buffoon on whom he's supposedly based. Heavily cut for various reissues and often shown in black and white. Directors listed as Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger, and the cast list: Roger Livesey, Deborah Kerr, Anton Walbrook, John Laurie, James McKechnie, Neville Mapp.
So this raises the question, if Roger Livesey's character, Clive Candy, bears no relation to David Lowe's Colonel Blimp, why is he invoked?
Why use that name in the title at all?
And why use the caricature at the beginning of the movie, including hanging out getting a massage in the Turkish bath? Well, Dave, I mean, I'm sure the answer must be out there because Michael Powell did a lot of autobiographical writing. My guess, which I was reflecting on a lot watching the movie this time, would be to take that savage satire, like the worst case to be made against Britain.
And its ruling class.
Yeah, as upper-class twits.
Out of touch.
Conventional, mindless colonialists. Accept that characterization of the British Empire and try to make the best possible case for it, nevertheless, in wartime.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable assumption.
But although the characters whose opinions we trust in this movie, Deborah Kerr in at least 2 of her incarnations, and Anton Walbrook, although they unconditionally love Clive Candy, nevertheless there remains this dark subtext of the Colonel Blimp character represented in the movie by this grotesque study of his that's frequently commented on by the other characters.
It's a dark, dark place which he goes to for solace and to regroup. Whenever he is without a Deborah Kerr, he goes on a rampage across the world and kills many, many animals and brings back their heads.
Magnificent wildlife. You really don't need to be killing elephants.
No, you definitely don't.
And then later on, when he's with the middle Deborah Kerr, Barbara Wynn, that bear that's being used as a coat rack and a letter holder, which is deeply disturbing.
I'm pretty sure I made this statement in the Fear and Moviegoing discussion, but it bears repeating. For someone who was a vegetarian already in my teens, it's pretty astounding how much I love this movie and love this character given his behavior.
It's not just the animal rights, though, or the destruction of 73% of wildlife within our own lifetimes, Dave. It's also the way that this is standing in for colonialism.
The reason he can go to all these places, British power reaches to every corner of the earth, either formally or informally, and he just has free reign. Whenever his heart and mind are unoccupied, he just pulls out his gun and kills things. And he's involved in plenty of small and large wars as well. And many humans also suffer terrible fates at the hands of the British Empire and people like Clive Candy.
And in the extras we were watching on the Criterion channel, this is commented on. Maybe one of the reasons critics and audiences didn't know what to make of this movie at the time is just because this main character is so enigmatic, so morally enigmatic. You don't know exactly how to feel about him, or if you do just react to him by loving him, there's a lot of weird baggage that comes with that. Accordingly, what the movie is quote-unquote trying to say, its sort of rational or analytical meaning, is also elusive.
It's an astounding display of narrative mastery. They give us all the tools to understand all these different aspects of Clive Candy, or Clive Wynne Candy as he becomes once he marries Barbara Wynne, but we only ever see him doing things that we're pretty much going to like.
Well, with this exception that I just noted.
We don't ever see him kill any animals.
No, but
or
when,
people.
As the heads go up, you know what's happening.
You know what's happening, but you don't see it. There is a difference. If you saw him on safari just blowing away elephants, I don't think this would be the same film.
I mean, you can make that argument for Gone with the Wind, too.
Yeah, of course you can. They're close to the edge here of lionizing the unlionizable.
Although when Scarlett O'Hara is using prison labor, the movie gets dangerously close to the reality of the character.
We pretty much see Clive Candy exclusively at his best throughout his long life. Even when the quality that they're aiming to highlight is his capacity for understanding how out of touch he is and making an adjustment with some help from his friends. And that goes against the caricature, because the caricature is, this is a person that can't learn, was formed in the 19th century and absolutely cannot alter his point of view.
But he says that about himself at the end, actually, that he is unchanged, that he is unchangeable, and that is somehow a negative capability.
Right, because what's unchanged about him is his ability to reevaluate himself and to actually pay much more attention to the people around him than you think he's capable of, and even than he thinks he's capable of. He's constantly surprising himself throughout this film by reacting a little bit differently than you'd expect a jingoistic officer to behave.
I mean, this is the duality that we're talking about. We know, because he's supposed to be Colonel Blimp, that he is this evil, mindless colonialist, and he's got the study to prove it. But what we actually see dramatically enacted in the movie is his friendship, when no one else would claim such a thing. His friendship with a German, and his romantic idealization of a very modern, liberated woman. Deborah Kerr is a lot more than charming in this movie.
She is incredible. I mean, this is the first movie I saw Deborah Kerr in, and it's no surprise that she became one of my very favorite actors. She is our second actor spotlight, first one I chose.
And she's so young in this movie, early 20s. As Edith Hunter, the first incarnation, she's got this perfect note of British comedy that is simultaneously completely rationalistic and absolutely dotty.
Her line readings are miraculous.
She would be so perfect in Oscar Wilde. She would be so perfect in The Importance of Being Earnest.
But what does a governess know, Mr. Candy?
Nothing, I can assure you.
It's so brilliant.
That off-kilter wobble in her eyes and her voice, despite being this prim, rational creature, are the tremors of madness. You know? It's just British rationality on the verge of madness. Which is also Wilde, and which is also Lewis Carroll, and which is, even though this isn't British, it's American, which is what makes her so perfect to play James's governess.
And we first meet her, not in person, but as the author of a letter that reaches Clive Candy in London, and it's got all kinds of capitalized words and underlined scoundrel, liar. She's having a very hysterical time in Germany.
And he seems to fall in love with her based on that letter. It's the thing that motivates him to go to Germany.
Even though the War Office says don't go.
And even though this is the only intrepid adventure of his life, this is what he chooses in his own mind to illustrate how he was once young and impulsive and romantic and adventurous. It's this letter that sets him off to meet the love of his life, his romantic ideal that he'll never stop searching for, never get over, and to also develop this lifelong friendship with Anton Walbrook.
I mean, he needs some new friends, because Hoppy, his pal in London, he's pretty funny, but he's limited. Guy with the weird mustache.
I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast when we were briefly discussing these movies in Fear and Moviegoing, but I know that we have talked about it off mic. The idea that this movie could be viewed as sexist in some way, because it seems to be about the protagonist's love for Deborah Kerr and all of her in-Kerr-nations, but it's really about the love story of the friendship between the two men that's mediated by this woman. But I was thinking about that, on this fourth viewing or whatever it is, too, of my adult life. And I think that's too simplistic. I think that is an accusation that could be more accurately leveled at a matter of life and death, although hopefully I won't feel that way the next time I watch it.
We'll be doing that as part of our special subject on the film Blanc in a couple of years.
But here it seems really important that all three of them form a group. None of the couples, including the male friends, could exist without the whole group, which is why it seems so much of a relief and so nostalgic at the end of the movie when the group is reconstituted, with Anton Walbrook being back and with yet another incarnation of Deborah Kerr.
In her Johnny variation. A wonderful character.
But that means that if this is a reconstitution of the group, as it should be, that means that there's something missing from the middle section and the middle Deborah Kerr, who is the only one he actually has a relationship with.
And that, too, shows Kerr's skill, because she somehow makes this character fairly lovable as well, but she is incredibly dull. She is the one that Clive Candy gets to spend part of his life with. Without Anton Walbrook there, he almost meets her on that fateful night after he gets out of the internment camp on his way back to Germany, but she's not home. Clive tries to restore the triangle by showing him a picture of her, a painting. He doesn't really recognize it. I mean, he gestures in that direction. He's like, yeah, there's something there of a resemblance.
With the final Deborah Kerr, Angela, or Johnny, he does see a resemblance.
Of course, he's been hearing now about how Edith was Clive Candy's ideal. I love that speech where Roger Livesey says, I suppose you could say she was my ideal if you were some sickening long-haired poet or something. Walbrook's reaction to that is to gather his thoughts and rethink his entire impression of what an English gentleman can be. Even though they have this lifelong friendship, I mean, they've only seen each other very briefly for intense moments over the 40 years. We're told that they wrote letters a little bit leading up to World War I, but after that, they have almost no contact until Walbrook drifts onto the shores of Britain after running away from the Nazis.
So I guess Roger Livesey, or Clive Candy, is this movie's spirit of realism and Britishism, as Deborah Kerr's sister Clodagh is in Black Narcissus in a very different way. He is the Humean Lockean lineage of stupid, dull, inert British pragmatism that's supposed to be allergic to poetry or romanticism.
But in fact is not.
Right. And of course the movie intertwines him with romanticism and poetry and Europe through Anton Walbrook and through Deborah Kerr.
I don't feel like this film is at all vulnerable to the criticism that it's really about two men and they're just using this woman as an intermediary, because
despite the fact that she's kind of is not really real, so it really should be vulnerable to that accusation.
No, but she's so palpable, especially in Incarnations 1 and 3, and the fact that there's that middle term, that's where, yes, you could fall into the idea that, oh, she's a nothing character. She's just there to ratify the whims and shallow thoughts of Clive Candy kind of at his worst. That scene where he reveals that he gave this benefit for the nurses of the West Riding of Yorkshire just to find Deborah Kerr because he saw her in a convent in the waning days of World War I is incredible. And her reaction to it, this is great. This is exactly what a middle-aged husband of mine would want to do. Just go grab a woman just because he likes the looks of her when she was sitting at a table. The other two Deborah cars would have punched him for doing something like that.
That's what you think?
I think so, yes. Because you see her in her Barbara incarnation, and it's sad when she dies, although that too is off screen. Almost every dramatic thing that happens is off screen. Everyone always remarks on that. It's definitely part of its aesthetic rhythm. It just helps to amplify how interesting Edith Hunter and Angela are. Angela/Johnny. I mean, another really important aspect of the film that I think we have to talk about is the way it embeds the flashback. Because we start, I mean, the movie seems like it's going to be a totally different kind of thing. And when I first saw it, I was like, is this going to be like Benny Hill or something? I mean, you got these guys buzzing around on motorcycles.
Jazz soundtrack.
Yeah, it never felt like Benny Hill. That's going way too far into the gutter. But it seemed like it was going to be a bit of a silly movie. And it was called Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. So I was like, okay, well, I'm finding it funny, but I don't think this is going to become one of my favorite films of all time. And you've got these guys who are chanting their slogans about war starts at midnight and how they're going to upend the stodgy order and attack before war starts. And this is going to show them that this is how the fight with fascism has to go. And all of this is important to the thematics of the film, but you approach Colonel Blimp, General Win Candy, in such an interesting roundabout way and through such a totally aesthetically askew angle that when you finally zero in on him, when they ambush him in the Turkish bath, it's such an amazing scene when the mists kind of clear and you see this torpedo-like body.
Right, and of course Roger Livesey is playing this like the David Lowe character, with really exaggerated comical expressions and...
Authority! Authority!
You know, he's just trying to make himself sound as slow and dim as possible.
But my dear fellow, it was agreed, wasn't it? Yeah, you're like, okay, well, this is a goofball. And he flips out and attacks Spud. Then we fall into the hot tub and he starts ranting about 40 years ago. 40 years ago.
Yeah, with the blub 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 sound.
Amazing.
Of underwater.
And he emerges into a completely different film. In the aftermath of the Boer War, he is recovering from some harrowing experiences in South Africa. You see immediately why he keys in on this moment. He is an upstart, and he's upsetting the elderly officers at this club in 1902, and he's about to embark on this confidential mission to Germany that nobody wants him to go on, except for Edith Hunter. I could talk about this movie for hours and hours, but there are so many great little understated moments and performances. Roland Culver giving him a lecture on why he should avoid politicians like the plague, getting all off track when he hears that Clive Candy knows Arthur Conan Doyle.
So I did have actually one question. I still don't quite understand in any detail what happens to cause the incident in the German pub that leads to, or music hall or whatever that is, that leads to the diplomatic incident in the duel. We'll leave that aside because we got too many movies to deal with. I was interested because when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the transformations we watch Anton Walbrook go through, including becoming a proto-Nazi right after the defeat of Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And that scene where Clive takes him to meet his upper-class friends for dinner, members of the military and industrialists. They're all promising him, cheer up, old fellow, we're going to get Germany back on its feet in no time. We need a trading partner. Don't you worry, capitalism will make everything right. And my question for you was, what went wrong with those plans?
I think it's pretty generally agreed, and people already were understanding this by the 1940s, that the terms of the Versailles Treaty were antithetical to peace in the long run.
But these men at this dinner seem to sincerely believe that capitalism is going to fix this.
Yeah, I think that's what they wanted to believe, but unfortunately there were countervailing tendencies at Versailles. France especially did not feel this way about Germany. They were the ones that pushed the hardest to inflict maximum punishment on Germany. The idea was that Germany was going to have to pay everyone back for all damage that was caused by World War I. And this contributed to the climate of despair and an economic spiral in Germany during the 1920s. And just as it was starting to climb a little bit out of that hole, the worldwide Great Depression hit and started to affect America. They had been buoying up Weimar Germany. They called in their loans. Very soon after that, you get Hitler and the Nazis going from a fringe group to the ruling party.
So if Clive is supposed to represent the best of the worst of Britain, it's interesting that the quality he seems to have that Anton Walbrook admires and that the two bookend Deborah Kerr's admire, but don't possess themselves, is something that, again, is more associated with classical American literature, which is a quality of indomitable innocence.
The optative mood, as Emerson would put it.
What he possesses is the inability to really imagine Nazism.
And there's something very scary about this kind of optimist, this kind of sunny individual who goes around killing animals for sport and genuinely not seeing it as sinister behavior.
Well, that's what Walbrook says to him, like in this speech at the end, when he's trying to make him confront the reality of Britain having to fight dirty. He's experienced the defeat of Germany and he's seen the Nazis, and so he's been disabused of any innocence he might have ever had. But what he says to him is that, yes, you have been raised to be an honorable gentleman, and a sportsman.
Yes.
But the movie is very conflicted about this, because in words, verbally, it may say this about how Clive sees war as sportsmanship. But the den represents sportsmanship itself as horror.
It does, yeah. But he doesn't see it. And he will never see it, right? Although in the last stages of the film, he's starting to get a more nuanced understanding of the human condition. But in World War I, that's a really revelatory scene. It goes by quickly, but you can't forget it, where they're interrogating those German prisoners. Clive Candy wanders in, asks a few questions about Kretschmar-Schuldorf. Nobody answers him. He asks about the dynamite that these Germans have, and they don't answer, and he's like, I gotta go now. He's talking to this guy with this super villain face.
I'm not a nice, simple English gentleman. I'm a simple South African.
And I know how to make you scum talk. Yeah, and obviously Britain was using torture during World War I, but Clive Candy can't see it.
Now, it's also this innocence, of course, that makes him capable of forming this friendship.
Yes.
This lifelong friendship with Anton Walbrook. Of course, does that actually reflect realistically what any upper-class British colonialist like Clive Candy would do?
Well, no, he's a special type.
But he's a special type that's supposed to be an archetype.
They've gone so far into the archetype that they've created a genuinely original character. I mean, that's the essence of this film. And it's a character that surprises the audiences, it surprises the people around them, and continually surprising himself. He doesn't know he's going to react this way to the guy that he gets into a duel with, but he looks at him and he's like, oh, this guy seems like a fun guy. I'm going to smile at him just before we lunge at each other with sabers.
It's kind of because Kretschmar-Schuldorf looks across at Clive Candy, actually looking at Roger Livesey. He sees something admirable about England. And of course, every nation wants to feel that however many historical horrors we have committed, there is something admirable about us as a people. There is some kind of poetry in the soul of this nation. So he looks across his saber at Roger Livesey and sees the poetry in the soul of England, and he falls in love with it. It's him kind of falling in love with Roger Livesey that allows Roger Livesey to fall in love with him.
Roger Livesey is an amazingly winning individual, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Whenever you encounter any material about the Archers, they will often talk about how crucial Livesey was to this film and to several of their other productions. And Thelma Schoonmaker talks about Livesey as an alter ego for Michael Powell. And his career wasn't going so well before this.
Can you imagine Laurence Olivier actually thinking about him specifically playing that Soviet character in the Anthony Asquith film?
The Demi-Paradise.
Probably Olivier could have embodied this innocence as well in a very different way.
Yeah, I don't think you have to denigrate Olivier to celebrate Livesey, although I am glad that they did get Livesey. And they only got him because Churchill wouldn't, or the army wouldn't let Olivier be in the film.
But Olivier is damn funny in The Demi-Paradise.
Of course, yeah, he is. And Livesey, I think, mostly on the stage before this. He's in movies. He plays the beggar that Rembrandt paints. That's a wonderful small role that he has in the mid-1930s.
Well, apparently he was, primarily, even after this, a character actor on screen.
Yeah, but you get some amazing moments with him in Powell, Pressburger, I Know Where I'm Going, and Matter of Life and Death, of course.
Guess we'd better move on.
Leonard Maltin gives Black Narcissus 4 stars out of a possible 4. Visually sumptuous, dramatically charged movie from rumor-godden novel about nuns trying to establish a mission in a remote Himalayan outpost amid formidable physical and emotional challenges. One of the most breathtaking color films ever made, winning Oscars for cinematographer Jack Cardiff and art director Alfred Junge. Scenes in which Sister Superior Carr recalls her former life, a key plot element, were originally censored from American prints. Directors Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger. Cast list: Deborah Kerr, David Farrar, Sabu, Gene Simmons, Kathleen Byron, Flora Robson, and Esmond Knight.
We've said before to each other, and I think also on the podcast, this is not one of our very favorite Powell and Pressburger films.
It's getting up there, though, for me.
Yeah, I liked it better this time. I think part of the problem that I had with it is that the movie's notoriety now so much surrounds the Kathleen Byron scenes and plot element of sex-crazed nun. And the florid melodrama around that. And it makes you come at the movie from kind of a camp angle that I think is not the best angle for appreciating it. The more I become interested on subsequent viewings in the Deborah Kerr plot and how that kind of balances Kathleen Byron, the more interesting the movie becomes. Also, it doesn't do me personally any good to try to look at this movie as having anything incisive to say about colonialism. I think to the extent that it has anything incisive to say, it's again about the British character. And not even the British character, but let's say what the British character represents. So we've got these nuns representing nothing spiritual at all. Like, that is not dwelt on at all in the movie. In fact, David Farrar is more interested in actual spirituality, talks more passionately about Jesus than these nuns ever do.
Well, they're a working order.
Exactly. So what do they actually represent? And the Census of Cinema article helped me sort of formulate this afterwards. What do they actually represent? They represent the Protestant work ethic.
Yeah, they're Anglican nuns.
And they're colonists in that sense, that they are trying to impose or establish the Protestant work ethic in this magical, exotic world that we don't really need to think of as anything geographical or ethnic or national.
Especially since it wasn't filmed anywhere outside of a studio.
Right. It's a deliberately, gorgeously artificial movie. They're the ego trying to colonize the id, or whatever way you want to conceptualize this. They represent a particular kind of attitude toward reality, and every other character in the film represents some kind of, particularly the ones living in the Himalayas, whether it's David Farrar or Sabu or the peasants, the woman who keeps...
She's really interesting. I love that character.
Every single one, and of course the holy man, every single one of them represents a subtly different constellation of attitudes toward reality that is opposed to the one that the nuns represent, and that Deborah Kerr sees herself as the chief representative of. Her problem becomes much more interesting to me when I think of it not as a spiritual problem, but as a managerial problem in impossible circumstances. And her hubris, but one that never makes her less likable somehow because it's heroic, is that she refuses to be sensible and give up until somebody's killed.
Well, she's been handed a job. The movie tells us from the very beginning that there are doubts about whether she can handle this job, whether she's ready for it.
Right, it's like Deborah Kerr was just born to play the governess, but her attitude here is not the same feverish, demented passion for the job. That's the governess's passion for her job is more spiritual than the way Deborah Kerr approaches the job in this movie, Sister Clodagh. Her approach is, again, managerial and as a representative of the work ethic. The way that the work ethic can help you get a foothold in reality and sanity that is, however, fragile and easily eroded.
It's all about controlling your life circumstances, which, as we see in the flashback, she had no control. She was in love with this guy that she couldn't fathom, and he just disappears on her. Decides to go to America. She is ashamed of the way in which she pinned all of her hopes on this dork. She never wants to find herself in that situation again. She wants to be the one setting the terms for success and achievement in life from that point on. And she joins, it seems like, the perfect order because they recognize her potential. They've promoted her several times already, and now she's got a chance to be regional manager, as you say. If she can succeed, it's going to be an amazing story.
Harold Bloom has this phrase that he likes to use for American and British novel heroines of his favorite classics. Heroines of the Protestant will. And this is what she is trying to do. She is trying to impose her will on this vast, overwhelming environment.
She starts out in life as something so different from that, and that's why those scenes are so important. And it's crazy that they were excised from the film in the United States. They're fishing, and she tells Con she never wants to go anywhere. She doesn't want to do anything different than the leisurely stuff that they're doing together in that moment. She really has an about face.
By making their work seem futile, this environment has reawakened these memories. Like, it seems that all the nuns' lives in the order are for suppressing the memory. So in a way, this is a real memory film too, are for suppressing the memory of their lives outside of the order.
Yeah, they're all dealing with it. We don't get flashbacks. We don't get inside anyone else's head. But clearly, that's what's going on. Sister Ruth is the one that shows the most marked mental decline.
Poor Kathleen Byron, although she loved this performance in the end, and it certainly became a famous one. But Kathleen Byron's in the same position as Jack Nicholson in The Shining. She's absolutely fucking bonkers from the first moment we lay eyes on her. There's very little progression. I mean, by the end of the movie, she does look like the demon in The Exorcist. But she's crazy from the start.
Well, she's troubled from the start, let's say. We're told that. The reason that she is assigned to the group that's going to this remote outpost is that possibly it'll be a change that will bring her back to her senses.
That's insane.
Well, it doesn't work out.
The nuns who don't go to the Himalayas, the ones that send these guys off on their mission, they have no ability to conceive of this place, right? So they don't know what they're getting Deborah Kerr and her troop into.
There are gradations in Kathleen Byron's insanity.
She's so unpleasant, too. It depicts...
Well, she's racist.
Yeah, it depicts vicious racism as a form of neuroticism. It's obviously just part of her hysterical irritability.
Yeah, but there's something touching, I think, about the way that she... I mean, even though she's a fool and she almost killed this woman that was bleeding to death, I mean, she was trying to take control of her destiny there and be the hero, and she did prevent this woman from dying, at least. Just the way she reacts, and of course we find out, if we don't see it at the time, that she's really dramatically overreacting to the small words of praise that she gets from David Farrar.
But Sister Clodagh, she's like the super competent worker who becomes the manager. And she is just so disgusted by Kathleen Byron that she can't stop herself from expressing it. She has so little and such thin and fragile empathy.
And they do both have something going on inside their heads that's fixated on David Farrar.
Sure. And I mean, by the end of the movie, Sister Clodagh has in fact basically started a romance with him. There's something similar about the two of them. You know, and it starts with their joking about the coffee.
Yeah, full of grits.
Yeah, where Sister Clodagh briefly reveals that she is a human being who thinks about things like whether her coffee sucks or not.
Sister Bryony, not one for the velvety coffee.
Oh, she loves her own coffee, though.
She does,
We see her reaction to it, different from theirs.
You thought of it as a managerial problem. This time I was thinking of it almost as a caper film, where it goes completely awry. This plan, it was just too big. This one was just too big.
it is kind of like The Usual Suspects in that like so many caper films, we've watched a few of them for the podcast recently, where you put together the worst team that you can just tell from the outset how they're all going to destroy each other and the plan.
Where all the fault lines are, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we watch it beautifully deconstruct itself.
You know what I was just thinking about, moments before we started the podcast, is where did that bell come from? The bell on the edge of the abyss.
Could have been part of the original setup, the palace.
It must be, but nobody ever mentions it.
I mean, what an amazing setting for most of the film. It was formerly the women's palace of the ruler of this area. It is a bordello that is now home to nuns. Got these sexualized murals all over the convent, an astounding feat of visual imagination.
Let's talk a little bit about all of these different perspectives on reality, in contrast to the nuns that I was mentioning. So we do have Aya, who loved the brothel.
She loves the brothel, she loves the wind, she finds it all invigorating. She just floats around that convent, and the nuns are a bit of a joy kill for her.
Oh yeah, she wishes the fun women would come back.
Yes, but she's pretty helpful to them throughout, even though she mocks them and doesn't believe they're going to make it any more than David Farrar does. She never undermines them.
David Farrar is trying to undermine them to a large extent, because he just can't bear the existence of these Anglican nuns whose lives are devoted to denying sensuality.
I don't know. I don't see it as that straightforward.
He can't resist needling Sister Clodagh all the time. He does help them as well, obviously.
He helps them a lot, and I think he likes them. I mean, his feelings for her go way beyond just liking her.
He likes them, but he's existentially opposed to them.
He knows they're going to fail, and he wants to rip the Band-Aid off quickly. I mean, that's his attitude, more than anything. He's not hoping that they'll fail. He just knows that there's no other way for this to go.
I feel like the best articulated opposing view of reality in the film, at least on this viewing for me, was Sabu's as the young general. He is an innocent.
Yeah.
He's an innocent. He's allowed to be an innocent because, of course, he's unfathomably rich and privileged.
I'm going to spend from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. doing physics with the physical sister. That's one of the great lines in this movie.
He's got such a wonderful delivery. He's perfect for this role in this movie. I can't imagine anybody else delivering these lines in the way that they have to be. He is another total innocent, including in his sensuality, but he's also completely intellectually curious, including about Jesus. His radical acceptance of everything on the basis of the aesthetic or on the basis of curiosity is a worldview that in its own way is as threatening to Sister Clodagh as anybody else's in the movie. When he goes casually from talking about what a lovely voice the egregiously drunk Mr. Dean has,
Yeah.
Who's deeply offended Sister Clodagh by coming to the Christmas service drunk.
Yeah, but when he says that, her eyes mist over. I mean, she is falling in love with him as well, even though she's ordered him never to come back.
Sure, but he goes from, talking about the wonderful voice of drunken Mr. Dean to talking about his great interest in Jesus Christ. And they're all the same to him. They're all on the same level to him. And I think probably this is what do you want to call this? I guess you would just call it the aesthetic attitude to life, and it's probably the perspective that I identify with the most in the movie.
The film takes its title from his scent, the Black Narcissus.
Oh, sister, do you not think that it is rather common to smell of ourselves?
Yeah, he makes an interesting argument. Kathleen Byron doesn't even try to respond. Imagine Kathleen Byron's sister Ruth going mental day by day teaching you European languages.
And he has no conception of sin. Instead, he is motivated to do good or do better by a heroic self-conception. It's a romantic, whimsical, unrealistic self-conception.
Yeah, he's a really interesting character. Esmond Knight, as the old general, is only in one scene, really, but I think he makes an impression. They will eat sausages. Europeans eat sausages wherever they go.
They will eat sausages until we know what else they like.
I really like little Joseph as well, that character. I mean, he gets thrust into some crazy situations.
Oh yeah, he finds the nuns insane and terrifying.
He also sticks with them, and they try to send him down to talk to the people. He knows if he does, they won't let him come back, so he stays.
And of course, we also learn that the holy man is unfathomably educated in the European style, and he has given all of that up in order to stare into the void.
He owns the land that they're on. When Deborah Kerr starts ranting about getting him out of there because he's distracting them from their busy work.
Like, this is what, of course, these nuns and their work ethic is avoiding. Glimpsing the void. So in that sense, they resemble Clive Candy.
Yeah, going on endless safaris. They're just treating education and rudimentary medicine as a safari. Certainly a more productive one than roaming the velds with a shotgun, but ultimately they have to leave. There's such an incredibly defeatist aura that hangs over this film from the very beginning. It's like, why are they even trying?
That is their lot as Christians. Why even try to be a Christian? It's not going to work. Speaking of which, despite the demonic demeanor of Kathleen Byron at the end of the movie, the scene where Sister Clodagh sits up with her to try to prevent her from sealing her doom by throwing herself at David Farrer obviously is modeled on, well, I guess it's Peter, James, and John who all sleep. So this is the soul that Sister Clodagh is primarily given to save. She is a novice. She cannot do it. She has nothing like the spiritual capability.
She nods off and is awakened by her tumbling Bible to the sight of Kathleen Byron cackling as she runs through the convent and escapes into the jungle, the inhospitable arms of David Farrar.
And yet, at the very end of the movie, there is kind of a glimpse of an expansive Christian vision in that she's not horribly blamed for this. She's just going to be demoted and have to do, some kind of penance and...
Deborah Kerr, you mean?
Deborah Kerr, yeah.
Because Kathleen Byron goes off a cliff.
Yeah, she's super dead. No, Deborah Kerr, this isn't some horrible burden of guilt for her to carry with her forever. It's just an acceptance of the fact that as a Christian, you are going to fail souls. It's going to happen to you.
And she wasn't ready. She says what she needs is a little bit more time in a middle management role, I guess. Maybe she'll try again somewhere else.
Yeah, with much less responsibility. And David Farrar doesn't really think that she can change, and he likes her flaws.
Yeah, she does become more likable as she loses control of the order.
Yeah, and of course gains humility, etc., etc. I think that maybe the source of the bond between her and David Farrar is that they are both kind of essentially competent people who nevertheless failed the people around them.
Yeah. I think David Farrar gives a great performance in this movie, and he's essential to several Powell Pressburger movies, notably Gone to Earth and Small Back Room, which we're going to be doing in a couple of months in The Archers in Black and White. I mean, he really strikes a perfect balance between insolence and a kind of guarded supportiveness for them, and all kind of shot through with the pessimism that is grounded in reality.
Why are the kids learning about weapons? That's a super weird scene.
They are under the thumb of force.
Yeah, I mean, presumably that is what it's there for.
I think so, yeah. The way Joseph says gun, that's the last one that he pronounces for the kids. Well, Kathleen Byron...
She's staring at Sister Clodagh and Mr. Dean.
Right. There's a tragedy all its own in the fact that we just don't have enough time to spend hours on each of these movies, because we could. Leonard Maltin on The Red Shoes. So, 3 for 3. He gives this one 4 stars out of a possible 4 as well. A superb, stylized fairy tale. Young ballerina is torn between two creative, possessive men. One a struggling composer, the other an autocratic dance impresario. Landmark film for its integration of dance and storytelling, and a perennial favorite of ballettomans. Brian Easdale's score and Hein Heckroth and Arthur Lawson's art direction and set decoration won Oscars, and Jack Cardiff's cinematography should have. Shearer is exquisite in movie debut. Directors Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger. Cast list: Anton Walbrook, Marius Goring, Moira Shearer, Robert Helpman, Leonid Massine, Albert Basserman, Ludmila Cherina, and Esmond Knight. So this is, I think, at this point, the most famous Powell Pressburger film.
At this point, I think it has been for a long time.
That's fair. Maybe it's a closer race now that they're all on the Criterion Channel. But for a long time, this was one of the touchstone art films, and the other Powell Pressburgers were a little bit overshadowed by it.
Like I said, when I watched it as a young woman, it was unbearable. It was a horror movie up there with backstreet.
Can see that.
At this point, after several viewings, I'm really, really starting to like it. And my way into it is that I've started to strongly identify with Lermontov. I think, that's been creeping up on me, I think, since the beginning with this movie. That Lermontov is right.
He must live for art alone.
Or at least it's a heroic ideal. And I really don't think that the movie makes the alternative of mere mundane mortal romance, as Anton Walbrook would look at it, a particularly attractive rival.
Oh, I think it's definitely tipping the scales.
Lermontov being right, it's still a horror movie.
Yeah, I don't think that makes it less harrowing to watch if you're gonna look at the world through Anton Walbrook's eyes in this film. It's a great performance. We didn't talk about him that much in Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, but he's incredibly essential to that film as well.
Well, he's kind of the soul of that movie, and he's like the anti-soul of this movie.
I mean, the same man who gave that speech about the disintegration of his family under the influence of Nazism is now just looking dead-eyed at anyone that wants to experience anything outside of a ballet theater. But there's some really pleasantly human touches about Boris Lermontov right from the beginning. He's dragged to this party. The film does place us in his point of view, in his subjectivity at this party. He is appalled that he might have to watch some amateurish dance performance, and so are we.
Right, and it is an imposition, and he and Victoria first bond over the fact that she can acknowledge that this was gauche.
He's still human enough to be discomfited after making his snarky remarks when he's confronted by Victoria Page, who says,
I am that horror.
He is taken aback. He's like, oh, I actually put my foot in my mouth. So, like, Lermontov is not unfeeling.
Well, he's unfeeling about anybody who gets in the way of his art.
He's implacable. But he does have feelings, certainly, as we know by the end of this movie, where it looks like nuclear fission is going on inside his brain. This is a man of deep feeling, but he's channeled all of it into one aspect of life.
There's so much to unravel in this movie, and I think I told you about my breakthrough reading the last time we watched it and talked about it in Fear and Moviegoing, of the possibility that, it's tempting to read Walbrook as repressed homosexual who keeps living vicariously through divas that he creates or whatever. And that, because this character apparently has no sexuality, the fact that Walbrook himself was homosexual, you can find some kind of subtext in that. That would be a fully legitimate reading. My idea that he might be in love with Victoria is barely changed by that reading anyway, that he might actually just be in love with her and have completely sublimated that. He could probably do that as a homosexual just as well as a heterosexual.
Yeah, I think this movie, despite how much the erotic figures into it, it absolutely doesn't need
labels.
It doesn't need labels, and it doesn't need physical intercourse to occur.
The complete destruction of him at the end of the movie, I think that has to be love.
It has to be. If not, he would just go, oh, well, that failed. We'll find another great ballerina and start all over again.
So why does he fall in love particularly with Victoria more than the other instances, one of which we see?
Grusha?
Yeah, where he has tried to do this and all these women keep disappointing him. He expends all this energy and he expends it on women, whether you want to give that a homosexual or heterosexual reading, you can do either. Creating great artists out of these ballerinas, and then they destroy all his work by getting married. And yet you have to imagine that what he is trying to do is to create an asexual marriage of art with these women. That's why it's women.
It is also important that he's dealing with a patriarchal society where he knows that there's going to be an incredible pull upon these women if they get married. Not just to get married and continue with their careers, but to give up.
You think that would lead him to avoid women and, like I said, try doing this with men instead. But no, it has to be some kind of sublimated erotic drive.
Yeah, I would think so. And feeling for social underdogs.
Sure, and you could certainly give that a homosexual reading, but again, not necessarily. You can do either. I think it's important to realize, too, something that may get overlooked in common assessments of the movie, that Victoria might be in love with him. Like when she gets dressed up in her fairy princess dress outfit
To go see him.
thinking that he has proposed a date. Why wouldn't she be in love with him at this point? And people comment on what a good-looking man he is. Nothing so simple is going to be asked of her.
No.
And she's always got those two pictures of Lermontov and Julian. And they don't necessarily just represent art and love. They could represent two loves, each demanding something different of her.
And they both represent art as well. I mean, after
Of
all,
course.
Gillian Craster is a great composer.
Right, and he seems content to be collaborating with her and for her to be the future star until Lermontov forces a choice and awakens Julian's own suppressed ambitions.
An interesting byproduct of the film. This is the destruction of Lermontov and Victoria Page, but the making of Gillian Craster, all of these dramatic goings on. I don't know what he's going to compose next after witnessing his beloved throwing herself into a train.
Maybe the greatest opera.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, that is the subject matter of opera. I like Marius Goring a lot in this movie, and that first scene where you get those bohemian students rushing into the theater to grab the seats, you know, that's the realistic side of Powell and Pressburger. They give you these amazing little entrees into micro habitats. The way they ground everything in this Anglican order, I mean, we feel like we know everything about the way those people hope to organize their days, and we get so much about mid-20th century aesthetes in this movie.
Yeah, I was like, were people in England in the mid-20th century really, young people, college students, were they really this excited about ballet?
Not the general public, but we're meeting the real aficionados, and I love this little debate going on at the beginning between the people that are music students and the people that are dance students, and they're each there for totally different things.
And those dance students are obviously caricatured bohemians.
Well, they are. That's true. I mean, because we are going to follow Gillian Craster, we're seeing them a little bit from the outside. But on the other hand, we're mostly going to be in the dance world for this movie. Just that fascinating vignette of elation and the deepest sense of betrayal that Julian goes through just in the first few minutes of this movie. He's championing Palmer, the great Palmer. That's why we're here. These dancers better be up to the music he's going to present to the world. And then Julian Craster realizes all of it's stolen from his own student compositions.
I like the point that you make that we start this movie, weirdly enough, from this outsider point of view of Julian's, outsider to the ballet world, that he's going to become so deeply implicated in. Walbrook is, at the beginning of the movie, weird and eccentric and scary, but he's also very benevolent. The advice that he gives Julian as a young fool.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right? He's not maliciously going to make it known to everyone, these accusations.
Oh, yeah.
And he doesn't even try to make Julian feel stupid. He just gives him good advice.
It's a much more difficult thing to realize one has to steal than to be stolen from.
He seems wise and discerning at this point, before he goes insane, because he realizes that he's going to lose Victoria.
Yeah, that's the catalyst. He's not prepared. He's prepared for any development except for Victoria Page abandoning her stated mission to live solely for dancing.
And I was saying, why does he fall particularly in love with Victoria? Why is she the end of him? I think it must be because what he sees in her when she gives that answer.
Well, she actually surprises him with her answer, equating living and dancing.
So he gets the first hint there, and then the realization of it when he sees her dancing for that little listless audience.
And she's just going all out no matter what. She doesn't care about the audience.
Well, she's going all out more than she would in front of people she's trying to impress, because it's like she's just
there in the moment.
And she's dancing for herself, right? He sees someone, maybe for the first time, that he really believes is like him, and that he can make into a copy of himself, and therefore finally realize this asexual marriage in art.
It's really interesting the way the film positions him, too, because what does he actually do? I mean, he's the producer. He's the impresario. He's not a former dancer who's teaching people how to dance. He presumably can't dance. He doesn't compose. He is just there putting all the pieces together.
Well, he's the director.
He's the one with the vision.
Before he sees her dance, he already sees her spirit, and that's what interests him. And nobody initially thinks she's that great a dancer. So what we have to believe, because the others aren't convinced, we have to believe that she is doing that she has an original style, that she is idiosyncratic, and that her dance is expressing this spirit that he sees in her, that he knows that the audience of aficionados is going to respond to.
We know that Moira Shearer was considered a great ballet dancer. I'm not qualified to understand or perceive individual styles in ballet dancing. I mean, I could see that she's certainly moving beautifully and in time with the music, but as you say, there must be something that goes way beyond just excellence, uber competence. It's something more visionary than that that's going on with her.
It's really a disappointment, actually, when he has that line about wanting to create something great out of something small, a great dancer out of you. It feels unnecessary because he has been championing her as this idiosyncratic artist. Well, yeah, as someone who is also creative in her approach to her art. But yeah, we just did 42nd Street, and this movie must owe a lot to the Warner Brothers Busby Berkeley movies. It is a backstage musical up to the point where this insane Busby Berkeley-like dance number occurs. Obviously, Busby Berkeley doesn't have anything to do with ballet, but what I mean is that the stage becomes a place of fantasy and transformation and a cinema of the fantastic, which is really interesting how in Busby Berkeley and in this movie and in David Lynch, how the stage becomes a symbol of a cinematic dreamland, or a portal to a cinematic dreamland. Why? Because the stage, in cinema, you can present all of these things that you can't on the stage. All of these fantastical images and photographic tricks.
Yeah, if there's one thing that the cinema doesn't need, it's the stage.
But apparently it does. The cinema apparently needs the stage to be its most cinematic.
It's a fascinating paradox. It's not too far off from going so far into an archetype like Colonel Blimp and coming out with something unprecedentedly original as a character. Similarly, you're using this constrained space of the stage to amplify the possibilities of cinema.
Busby Berkeley's more radical, though, because he just says, hey, this is the way it is now. We're now playing by different rules. Whereas here we're given some hints in the script that, when Julian asks her, aren't you going to imagine anything when you dance on opening night? We're given some hints that what we're seeing is her imagination as she dances.
And then this amazing finale of just a spotlight following the ghost of Moira Shearer around the stage.
Or the absence.
Pretty incredible way to end a movie.
Because I was thinking of this as, the possibility that Lermontov and Victoria are both in love with each other, but of course he doesn't ever want to realize that in the form of a romantic relationship, and she...
I don't think she does either with him.
Yeah, maybe... Well, no, she's more normal. So, like I said, she thinks she's going on a date when she gets dressed up and gets in his car, right? So she thinks things could proceed in a normal way at that point. But it's probably the last moment that she thinks that. And the last moment she cares about it. Because
once he gives her the main part.
Exactly. Who cares about whether the great man wants to sleep with her?
They become something much more important to one another.
Thinking about it that way, to me, makes that moment where he thinks he's won. He thinks he's vanquished Julian and won her soul. Where Anton Walbrook kind of crouches next to her and sort of leans his cheek against hers and has this expression of ecstasy on his face while she is being torn in half and her face is a mask of tragedy, and he just starts soothingly talking to her about how, art is going to be so much more fulfilling for her than any mere relationship could ever be, and just this creepy horror of the fact that Lermontov, however much he loves her, he can never offer her just mere human warmth. If they really are going to be in this sexless marriage of art, there will be no warmth for her ever. You see what I mean? He's just offering her this, it's almost like the Gilda line. Hate is the only emotion that has ever really warmed me. All he can offer her is this icy coldness where that warmth should be. There will be nothing human in her life again.
And it's all the more tragic because, as we were saying earlier, or as I was saying before, this isn't an unfeeling man. They can't manifest themselves in that way. But he is not a cold Mephistophelian manipulator. He's going to be just as destroyed by the final events of this film as Victoria Page is, practically, as anyone. I mean, he's a casualty of his own designs.
And the film isn't really interested in Julian's reaction. It's only interested in what happens to Victoria and Lermontov.
Well, that's true. Yeah, and Marius Goring was a good sport. He does get some fun things to do in this movie. Probably not as fun as playing that French aristocrat in A Matter of of life and death. His behavior leaves a lot to be desired there. I mean, she asks him, just wait, let me give this one performance and let me think. And he won't. He's like, nope, ultimatum time.
No, he says, the red shoes are going to get you. It will never just be this one performance. So he says, I'm giving up my art, now you must give up your art too. Well, it's not as easy for her. We must give up our art together. Or Lermontov on the other side. We must give up love forever. And so I think what happens, this is my theory as I was watching the movie this time, is Victoria does possess this single-minded vision that makes her like Lermontov. But she is too fragile, right? Unlike him. He is the only person who can live the way that Lermontov lives, right? And even that he ends up destroying himself on that basis.
That's right. He can't deal with the ultimate consequences of it.
She cannot deal with, like, as I say, giving up all human warmth forever. She can't deal with that. She shouldn't have to deal with that.
No.
So it's this attempt to live this ideal that destroys them both.
And is that the message of Hans Christian Andersen's The Red Shoes?
No, The Red Shoes has... Well, okay, first of all, the fairy tale The Red Shoes has nothing to do with... It's about a child who wants red shoes.
And be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing, right? That's the moral. It's a pretty simple story.
It's not a moral about art.
No.
It's as Hans Christian Andersen's stories go, it's one of the very simplest and least interesting, and it really has nothing to do with Victoria's dilemma.
Only in the minds of Powell and Pressburger. They transformed it into something that does have a great deal to do with her dilemma.
That art will consume you and kill you? But is that what happens to her? Because it doesn't seem like that is what happens to her. It seems like what happens to her is that she is being torn apart by these conflicting demands. Not that she's being consumed and destroyed by her art. But at the ending, when she tells Julian, please take off the red shoes, see, that always seems to me to be in conflict with the message of the entire movie, because she seems to be saying, oh, if only I hadn't been so ambitious, or if only I hadn't loved art so much, then we could have been happy. So she seems to be renouncing the idea of art at all. But he's an artist too, so that doesn't make any sense.
It's complicated, and I don't think that there is a single way to read it.
I think they're more interested in the image of these red shoes than they are in any specific meaning that you could attribute to it like that.
And the film is certainly about the polar antipodes of human aspiration.
Well, it's one of those movies about how art preys on life, like, in a very different way, Lottie and Weimar.
Yeah.
But again, I think, I remain sympathetic to Lermontov's project.
We're crying for Lermontov at the end of this movie.
Well, he killed the thing he loved, so you have to cry for that.
That's right. It's like Peter Lorre.
Although you could also argue that Julian killed her, but who cares?
Exactly, that's what I was saying. I mean, yes, his stodgy behavior there certainly contributes on a plot level to her decision to end it all. But that's not where the thematic heart of the film is.
Are we crying for him at the end because he has lost her as an artist, or because he has lost her as a person?
Both, I think. More troubling is the idea that, I guess, like Black Narcissus, where they're doomed to fail. I mean, this thing that he gets started was doomed to end this way. It feels like that, obviously, as you go through the movie. It does have a kind of fairy tale structure, a grim fairy tale structure, where you know there's going to be death and mayhem. And he should have seen it coming, and it all comes crashing in on him when he introduces the final performance.
His delusion, again, is to imagine that he can win because he knows how strong this desire of hers is. He imagines that he really can just dislodge her from human life without killing her.
He dislodges her from the entire plane of existence. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Let's briefly delve into Fear and Moviegoing in Toronto. What do you have to say about Flowing, which we saw on Saturday?
I'd rather hear what you have to say first.
Well, this is one that we watched early on in our explorations of Naruse on home video, talking about the way Powell and Pressburger explore subcultural habitus. This is a fascinating subcultural exploration of a geisha house in the mid-1950s, disintegrating under modern pressures and all kinds of other influences coming from far and wide on these people.
There's something so methodical about the way Naruse presents melodrama, isn't there?
There is, yeah. And so much of it depends on a knack for finding exactly the right point of view character. Having Kinuyo Tanaka witness all of this.
Yeah, exactly, right. Which I guess is from the novel, but yeah, I mean, that's perfect casting.
No, she's so amazing in this movie.
And yeah, it gradually resolves. There's so many characters with so many plots going on, but it gradually resolves as her character being crucial. And the way that it seems like for one moment toward the end, because things are just getting so awful and so despairing as usual. And the way it seems like near the end that it's going to resolve into a kind of imitation of life story, where she becomes the only thing keeping these despairing people going. And then she decides to just refuse that role, which is good, because it seems like that's going to offer some kind of happiness or relief to the narrative. But at the cost of this cliche of the servant who becomes the spiritual comfort of the family or whatever.
Right, and let's not forget that she makes that final decision. A lot of it is due to the revelations that she gets about the unsavory business activities going on behind the scenes, right? This woman that seems to have been benevolently keeping the wolf from the door for this geisha house, all of a sudden shows her true colors and says, I want to snatch this whole place away from them and you're going to be the manager here now. It just breaks the spell. Whatever she was thinking might be possible here. She's like, no, I can't fix this. All that can happen is I wind up taking over. That's not what they want for me, and that's not what I want for myself. I'd rather go back and live with my miserable family.
My awful relatives.
Yeah. It's a great movie. Such a big cast. There's so many interesting people in it. Haruko Sugimara, one of her best performances out of millions that we've seen.
Oh yeah, the drunken singing scene that goes on forever.
So good. Hideko Takamine, we know that she is the most important actress for Naruse, but in this movie she's got kind of a smaller role.
Yeah.
And she's a little off to the side. She's dealing with her own dilemma. She is half inside the geisha world and half outside it, and she keeps talking about how she's just not constitutionally capable of being one of these geisha, but she wants to be near them. That's a real problem. Hopefully she's gonna resolve that somehow, but she's not gonna do it with Kinuyo Tanaka's help.
That's right.
And we've got The Stranger Within a Woman, second to last film by Naruse.
Yeah, it seems like right at the end of his career, because he died in the early to mid 60s, he made a lot of these thrillers. He was shifting into a new mode, but, well, I don't know a lot, but he made a few. He was shifting into a new mode. I'm sure there were changing tastes, changing styles. The theme is guilt, and can it be overcome? Can there be any transcendental escape from guilt? A quasi-accident, or actual accident, is the cause of the guilt in both cases. And this movie just very repetitively, in scene after scene after scene, drums in the protagonist's guilt.
Incredible misdirection in the narrative structure of the film, although using the title The Stranger Within a Woman kind of gave me a clue where this movie might be going.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole time you're thinking, okay, it's got to be the wife, but how? Was she the murderer? Etc.
Yeah, or is it somehow gonna wind up being about the murdered woman? Are we gonna get flashbacks that give us more insight into her character? But no, I think pretty early on I started to figure out, okay, we've got to watch this wife, because something much more interesting than it's not just gonna be her as a sounding board for this crazy Raskolnikov guy who's dealing with crime and punishment issues.
I mean, it does make me wonder how frequently this topic came up in Japanese genre novels, bestsellers and whatnot at the time, because obviously when you're thinking of it in the post-war context, this idea that a totally normal guy could, for no reason at all, just cross the line into being a perverse sex murderer,
Yeah.
and then just be dying of guilt forever after and never be able to shake it.
He just wants to tell the world by the end. First, he says, I'm so relieved, after telling his wife. And then, no, that's not enough. He's got to tell his friend. And then that's not enough. He's got to tell everybody what he's done.
But it is really similar to Scattered Clouds, right? The man who causes the accident has to try to make it right, whether the woman who's lost her husband wants him to or not.
To make amends. It's his 12-step program. Anyway, we'll find some way to talk about this movie in depth. I thought it it was amazing.
And it's a super weird way to film a thriller. Chabrol also filmed it, and I bet it's not very similar.
Probably not. Very striking work from Naruse. He had lost nothing as the 60s headed toward their conclusion. The 60s and Naruse himself headed toward their conclusion. All right, well, that's going to have to do it for this week. I wish we could have spent 24 hours on these films, but let us know what you think, particularly Simon, our Powell Pressburger loving listener out there. Maybe we have many of those. A declared one is Simon. Give us your reactions to our thoughts, and you could just leave our thoughts aside and tell us what you think, too. And that goes for everyone out there. You can write to us at our Gmail. You can join our Discord. Lots of ways to communicate. And next week on the podcast, we move into Actourist Spotlight, episode 2 of Delphine Seyrig. We'll be talking about India Song and Baxter, Vera Baxter, a Margaret Duras double feature.
Oh, you don't want to miss that.
No, you don't.